I'm Layla Saad, and my life is driven by one burning question. How can I become a good ancestor? How can I create a legacy of healing and liberation for those who are here in this lifetime and those who will come after I'm gone? In my pursuit to answer this question, I'm interviewing changemakers and culture shapers who are also exploring that question for themselves in the way that they live and lead their life. It's my intention that these conversations will help you find your own answers to that question too. Welcome to Good Ancestor Podcast. Tiffany Jewell is a Black biracial writer, antiracist educator and consultant, and mama. She's in her 15th year as a Montessori educator and nearing 2 decades of work in schools with young folks, families, and educators. Tiffany loves to bake bread, build Legos with her 8-year-old and 4-year-old, and loves watching British detective shows. She spends a lot of time dreaming up how she can dismantle white supremacy and reimagining liberatory schools. In January 2020, Tiffany published her first book. This book is Antiracist, 20 lessons on how to wake up, take action, and do the work. Okay, hello everybody, and welcome to this episode of Good Ancestor Podcast. I am here with Tiffany Jewell, author of this amazing book. This book is Antiracist. My daughter saw it, so actually this book sits right here next to me on my shelf. And my daughter saw it the other day and she's like, that's a cool title. Right? And I said, and it's for kids as well. She was very, very impressed. So welcome, Tiffany. Welcome.
Thank you. I'm so honored to be speaking with you right now and so excited. And then to see you matching the cover of the book is just like...
Yes, I want it to be as colorful and sparkly as possible because this book, which was illustrated by Aurelia Durand, is a beautiful book. It's also full of amazing information, which we are going to talk about in this conversation. But the it's just... I love that I opened to it. This is my Angeli, right? I love that I've opened to my Angeli. It's just beautifully illustrated, and I wanted to match it with my colors. So that's what I'm doing today. So we're going to open with our opening question to get us set, and then we'll dive in. All right. So tell me, Tiffany, who are some of the ancestors, living or transitioned, familial or societal, who have influenced you on your journey? And I'm really curious about this question with you because I read the book and I'm like, there is so many sources seem to be coming in here.
I know there are so many ancestors, and what I realize is I'm still discovering who they all are. And so immediately I think of my grandparents. My Nana is still alive. She's 90. She's the same age as the Queen of England.
Oh, wow.
So
okay,
93, yes. I think. And so my Nana and my Pep-Up, who are from my mom's side of the family, and then my ancestors on my dad's side of the family, I don't really know. Mm. And so I think of how they're my known ancestors who are familial, and then the unknown ancestors, and it's the ones that I don't know who keep coming back to me and whispering to me know us more.
Yeah.
I'm trying. And then there's the teaching ancestors. And so Maria Montessori, I'm a Montessori educator, and she's around over 100, I think 150 years ago at this point. And she just really laid the groundwork for all my aha moments as an educator. Mm. And then Enid Lee, who is based in Canada, who wrote the book Letters to Marcia in the 1980s, which is a book for anti-racist education. And I always look at her as kind of the foundation of the work we do as anti-racist educators. Dr. Beverly Daniel Tatum, who wrote Why Are All the Black Kids Sitting Together in the Cafeteria, and Dr. Barbara J. Love, who is more local to where I am in Massachusetts. Mm. She wrote an article or small essay, a piece of work called Developing a Liberatory Consciousness. Mm. And I feel so blessed. I was able to work with her a couple of times. When I tried to get my master's, which was not something that worked out for me. But then she came back into my life through another person, and was able to do some work, and just her framework for looking at the world as like this cyclical awakening and processing, just like really it's kind of everything I do comes back to her. So she's like one of those great living ancestors who I like keep nodding to, and I'm so like thankful that she came into my life when she did.
Oh.
And then like going with the old like greats, Harriet Tubman. Like when I was a kid, I was like obsessed with her.
What
and
was
I
it
even
about
like
her?
You know, so there was like I grew up
everything, but
everything. She's amazing. I grew up in central New York, in Syracuse, New York, and she lived in Auburn, which was like a couple towns over. And so I was always like fascinated by like abolitionists and the Underground Railroad. And like as a kid, I was like, that just makes sense. Like, but with Harriet Tubman, there weren't like, I don't remember a lot of children's books about her. So I remember reading kind of more adult biographies about her. And she was on a postage stamp, and I was a stamp collector as a kid. So I remember like writing an essay about her and winning an award. So I just was just like, she's amazing and everybody needs to know about her. And she's still like,
amazing.
It's those like, she's always there. And then Malcolm X, like he like his work came into my life when I was in college, and just really helped me helped me focus more in the direction that I was headed in.
Wow, that's amazing. And there are so many. So you've talked about your familial, your familial ancestors, and the kind of because you're a Black biracial woman. Your mother is white, and your father is Black, and you grew up with your mother. And I would love to talk a little bit about that experience of being Black biracial, growing up in a sort of, not having the primary parent with you being reflective of Blackness, and what that was like. But I'm thinking about how that influence is still there. You said you're not that connected with your father's side, but that sort of yearning for identifying with that side of yourself, and really, would you say that's like a really driving part of your work?
I think so. Yes, it is. I think with my mother's side, there are also like, I'm a first generation American on her side. So she immigrated from England when she was 4. And so also like the household, the white household I grew up in wasn't a typical American household.
Right.
Like we had tea and we had Cadbury chocolate all the time. And it was just like very British. Crumpets, shepherd's. I don't think we did crumpets, but we did shepherd's pie. We had curry, curry with raisins in it, which was very different from like the curry you could get. Like we never had Chinese food or other stuff because like, and then also grew up in like, my Nana went to the very much World War II. So we had like Spam and corned beef, like all of those tinned things.
Yes. Yeah.
And then when I was 5, so our dad was like, my parents were never married, and our dad lived in like the other street, and we see my grandma and his stepdad and my uncles. And then when I was about 5, he got in a car accident because he was driving drunk. And I remember even telling my kindergarten teacher, like, my dad's in a coma now. And my teacher just like walking, like just being like, okay. And then like moving on.
Oh, wow.
And I'm like, now as a teacher, I'm like, why didn't she pause for a moment?
Wow. Yeah.
Yeah. And that's one of those moments where you're just like, okay.
Yeah.
And kind of when he came out of the coma, his like memory, he didn't have much of his memory was shifted. Like he didn't really remember our names. And then his family was like taking care of him. And then they all moved to Atlanta. And so they like removed themselves from our lives. And we would get a phone call every now and then, but he didn't sound like my dad. And so that just kind of like fizzled out more. And so I would still see his brothers sometimes, my uncle, or not even my uncle, but my aunt and her son. But then as we all got older, like our parents didn't keep up with that, and we were too young.
Separated. Right.
So now, like, as an adult, I'm like, okay. And my son, who's 8, is now like, don't you want to go see your dad? And I'm like, we don't know where he is. Like, his sister doesn't know. He's a homeless Vietnam vet right now. So there's, those things, and it's so, like, there's a lot of loss on that side, and then like a lot of like picking up and trying to put it all back together. Yeah.
It's thank you for sharing that. I was listening to Girl Trek had an interview recently on a Facebook broadcast with Angela Davis and Nikki Giovanni. And one of the opening questions that they asked them both was this sort of to say, who were they the daughter of? It's this campaign that they have called Daughter of. Yeah. And so they'd say something like, so for me, it would be, I'm Layla, the daughter of Hasne, who is the daughter of Aisha, and so on, as far back as you can go. And I think it was Angela Davis who kind of said her name, I think her parents' name, her mother's name, maybe her grandmother's name, and said that's it. That's as far back as I can go, and that's as far back as I need to go for me. And so when we talk about this idea of being a good ancestor, I think it's really important to honor the fact that looks so different for so many of us, depending on both our individual family histories and our personal collective racial histories. I think about myself as a first generation Brit. My parents are East African, though they have very strong familial ties. I didn't grow up with my grandparents. Right. I know them. And actually my maternal grandmother is somebody, all of them have passed. All my grandparents have passed, but my maternal grandmother is someone who comes to me a lot in dreams, just all the time. Yeah. But I didn't have, because of the distance, just geographically, the relationship that my kids have with my parents. The relationship my kids have with my parents is my parents are also their parents. They're there right now at my parents' house right now. And they are there every day, especially during this quarantine. Yeah. When it's not quarantine, they're there once a week at the weekend. Right. But right now they're there every single day as support for me, right? So we all have, I think for my kids, they could not imagine not seeing their grandparents. For me, I've had times when I did and times when I didn't, Right. And it looks so different for each one of us. And then the story that we make around that is so important as well, because it can influence us in ways that are either very healing or that can leave a big hole. Side. I do feel like very fortunate that my British grandparents were they helped raise us. Like we were at their house every day after school and every day in the summertime, and like thankful to have that. But and they we don't know the names, where did my last name come from? I don't know. And so tell us a little bit. So this is a question I was asking earlier about, and then we'll get onto your book. But I would love to know from your experiences as a light-skinned black biracial woman, girl first, and then woman, growing up in an environment with a white mother, white grandparents. How did you understand yourself racially in your family and then in the world? So I have a twin sister, which was a great growing up experience. So I thankfully always had somebody who looked like me reflected me right away. Right. And so, she has blue eyes and I have brown eyes, but everything else about us is very similar. And so we always had that. And then we grew up in a very racially diverse neighborhood, and everyone was economically pretty much the same. But we had
Irish immigrants, we had Vietnamese immigrants, we had Black folks, white folks, like Indigenous folks, all like within 2 blocks. And so I was able to like see myself or people like me within our immediate block. And then my elementary school was probably 85 to 90% Black students.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's amazing. And yeah.
It was our neighborhood school, and it was the same elementary school that my mom and her siblings went to. So I was able to see that reflection everywhere.
Yeah.
And I also like remember like remarks people would make to my mom, like, "Oh, you keep those girls so neat and clean." And that would be like comments from other white folks.
Parents, right.
Parents,
yeah.
People in the grocery store, you're like, why do you don't even know us? And so that like thinking of, and my mom, like, I don't even remember what she would say, but then would maybe like when we'd walk away would mutter like, well, why wouldn't you be neat and clean? You know, like,
right.
And I do like also remember like sometimes like the school system labeled my sister and I as white. And with our light skin, we got a lot of advantages that other kids didn't. And I remember sometimes I felt like my mom was the only one who was like, you are Black. You are not white. You are Black children. And like she braided our hair. Like she took care of us in a way that I really like culturally appreciate.
Yeah.
And it was also like, we were growing up in this very like white household, and elementary school felt okay, but then middle school, it's like there were a lot more white kids in our school, and that became a time where I was like, I don't really know who I'm supposed to be right now.
Right.
I didn't know where to fit in.
And was it and I ask this because I know this is a question that I get, and I'm a Black woman, but I know a lot of Black Indigenous people get this color. What are you? Where are you from?
Yeah.
What are you really? Yeah. And so did you find as somebody, and again, I ask this also because my niece and my nephew are biracial.
Yeah.
They are, you wouldn't necessarily know that they're biracial unless you saw their mother. But they are biracial, and I often think about how they will see themselves and how the world will see them, and what you know. And so this is a conversation that's very meaningful to me. I think it's so important to know who you are, but when you're young, everybody's trying to define you for themselves, right? To try and make you what makes them most comfortable.
They're like, should I bring her on, or do I like cast her aside like I do?
Right.
You know, and it is so I can't even like, I lost my train of thought, but it is like that what are you question. It's like the constant, it's one of those constants in my life. Like I remember it from when I was younger, and then it really was like kind of when I got out of like the comfort zone of home and having my sister, because you know, if there's 2 of you, like people are like, oh, okay, you're a thing,
right?
Right. So it was like in college, and then especially like after college, where I got that question all the time, like, what are you? And working out in the world, and it was always white folks asking the question. Black folks don't need to ask that question. Like, Black folks know.
Right.
Tell me.
And what do you think? I mean, I think I know why it's people who are white who ask that question. What do you think it is? What is it that?
So like it wasn't until I think it was like 22, and a friend had a bunch of us over, and he was a white guy, and like we all worked at a restaurant together, and his dad came over, and he was like, oh, my dad's so good at like playing this game. Dad, guess what she is? And I was like,
oh wow.
What? And it was like one of those moments I was like, I thought we were friends. And like the other like friends we had, like there was like an Iranian woman, there was a Vietnamese woman. I was like, we are all like, it felt like we were like a global group of people. And it was at that moment I was like, oh, like one, like figuring out like somebody's race is a game, because at that moment I felt like I wasn't normal. Like I was definitely like an other.
Yeah.
And it was one of those moments where I was like, all right, we're not going to be friends anymore. Like, we don't need this.
No.
And it like that question just keeps coming up, because people like want to be able to define whether I'm like somebody to like keep close or to like cast aside, or like, is she going to be that bridge for us? But to what community is she going to be the bridge for? I had a roommate when I was in my 20s, and she and I looked very similar, and she was Filipino. Her mom was Filipino and her dad was white. And then me and me both had freckles. And whenever we went out, people always assumed we were like sisters, because they couldn't place us anyway.
Right.
But they needed to. And why can't you just let to know us for who we are?
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, that thing that you just said about, is she going to be the bridge? Just really, that just felt very, because it's very much like you're not your own whole person. You're a person that we can use for our own, for what makes sense for us. And that's what white supremacy does, right? Is how can this center me? How can this serve me? How can this help me? And you're a whole human being. So I'm sorry, Sorry. No, go ahead.
Oh, well, there was that time then where I was like, I can be a bridge between the two, like taking on all of like what white supremacy put onto me. And I was like, I can do this, and I can like work with white folks, and I can work with Black folks, and I can like be this savior. And then I was like, wait a minute. And it was exhausting.
Well, that's what I want to ask you about this then, because I'm really glad you took us here, because I think, as someone who is sort of straddling both identities, or has lived in both worlds and holds both inside of yourself as a whole human being, I think that that makes sense that you would think maybe that's my job. Maybe that's what I'm here to do. Maybe that's why I am who I am. But you're holding so much when you're having to be that for everybody. How did you come to the realization that no, this isn't what I'm here to do or be?
It took several iterations. So the first time when I was like, I'm going to be that bridge, was in college. And I was like the only woman of color in many of my college classes. And there was one, I remember sitting across the aisle from him, and there was this white guy who had this big like gold watch, and he was always like, I'm gonna play devil's advocate here.
Oh, that guy. Okay.
That guy.
The devil's agent. Yes. Okay.
Yeah. And it was in like a religion class. And like I just was kind of like, all right, I can be this bridge. And just like talking with him was so exhausting, that I was like, I don't have to do this actually. Like he has his own learning to do. And I moved from like, I thought I was going to like be a high school English teacher. And then I was like, I want to work with little kids. So then like I started taking classes to work with younger kids, and it was working with them. I was like, I get to be my whole self every day. And I get to like be joyful, and I get to like be silly and goofy. And so that was like one of those moments where I was like, I don't have to like be here for all of the like white male adults.
Right.
And then just like the other time was at the work, like the school that I currently work at. This is my 15th year there.
Wow.
I know. Like I thought I was going to be there for like 2 years.
Wow.
It's I'm always like, okay. And for a while I was like, I'm going to be the one who brings racial justice to this school, and was like, I can like bridge between the students of color and the white teachers. And then I was like, this isn't my work. I can't do this alone. And that took years to figure that out. And it was anti-racist, or it was a Montessori for Social Justice conference, and we all had an anti-racist training that maybe 7 of us from our school went to, and everyone got like the same language. And I was like, okay, wait, it doesn't have to be me. Like, it can be all of us doing this work together. And it was like a big shift for me.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Amazing. So that's how you got into being a teacher, and you've been working at this school for 15 years, which is incredible. Congratulations. It's amazing. Tell us a little bit. I want to talk a little bit about your work as a teacher before we go into your book. So you work at a Montessori school. For those of us not familiar, with what Montessori does, I know that they exist. I know we have one here in Qatar. Yes. They are worldwide. How are Montessori schools different to, I guess, regular schools and non-Montessori schools? And what attracted you to working in that kind of a school?
Yeah. Montessori schools started in Maria Montessori, a physician, started in Italy, and she was kind of charged with working with students that nobody else wanted to work with. And these were students who were living in housing communities whose parents worked all the time. They were undernourished.
Yeah.
Like, no, but they weren't like able to keep, like people weren't keeping them clean.
Yeah. Hey, kiddos. It's okay. We're both mamas, so we're good to keep going. Don't worry.
And kind of what she did was she observed the students, and she observed like, oh, well, they're not learning to read because they're hungry, or they and so she started creating kind of works and things to help children take care of themselves and become autonomous in their lives. And so I always think of like going back to that as the root of Montessori. Is our goal is to really empower children to be able to advocate for themselves and to take care of themselves so they can become like whole people and not have to rely every moment on the adults in their lives for like deciding what they're going to learn and what they're going to eat and when they're going to eat. And I think like there are times when Montessori educators can do this really well, and there are times when they don't. And my friend Amelia always says like Montessori has the ability to liberate and heal the child, but it's the ability, like we look at it, the ability is there, but how are we going to use this philosophy and pedagogy?
Right. Amazing. And so, and what drew you specifically to working in a Montessori school?
I kind of stumbled on it by happenstance. Like I was living in Philadelphia and moved to Massachusetts and needed a job. In Philadelphia, I worked in an early child care center with young toddlers and toddlers. Like my biggest accomplishment to date as a teacher is like potty training a class of 11 boys.
Oh my God. Potty training my own 2 kids is
it's way harder actually.
Really? Really?
Your own children is
oh my gosh.
And I like still think of that. I think of like like that was also the first time I was in a school setting where it was all Black women, and it was so awesome and beautiful. There was and then my friend Mayumi, who is from Japan. So all women of color were in the school, running the school, guiding children.
Wow.
It was so beautiful. And then I moved to Massachusetts and I had this like culture shock because I was like, all the children are white, all the teachers are white. Like, what is this? But I applied to be an aftercare teacher because I wanted to work with children, but I was also working in a cafe. And then they just kind of like needed a sub for a classroom. I started working in the 3 to 6-year-old classroom. And I loved how children were using glass pitchers to pour water for themselves to drink.
Yeah.
And everything was child-sized. And when the teachers wanted to talk to the children, they brought their bodies down to the floor to look in their eyes. And it was the philosophy, like I was just drawn, I was like, oh, children are really honored and they're seen and they get to make decisions in how the classroom is run. So I was really drawn to that. and then there was an opening in the elementary classroom, and I liked the teacher and I like elementary age students. So I was like, can I try this? And the principal or the head of school was like, no. And then one of the parents like advocated for me. And,
oh, wow.
Because we were like whispering about it. And elementary is like where I stayed. I love working with 6 to 9 year olds.
Yeah. Oh, wow. I love that. Is in Montessori schools, do you think it's more, I don't know if it's easy or there's more ability to be able to talk about things like anti-racism and racial justice and social justice? Is it more, I don't know what the word is, but like open for that? Or
I think so. My dream is yes. My dream answer is yes. And I think in my classroom, it was very easy. And I think in some classrooms it is, and others it was really hard. At the elementary level, there's something called the 5 great lessons. And so you start with the birth of the earth. And it's all like, it's looked at through the lens of science. And so Maria Montessori, even though she was Catholic, she was also very scientific. Which is a cool like dichotomy in a person too. And so we look at the science of that, and then we look at the coming of life. And so looking at from very first creatures to the next story is the coming of humans. And then there's the story of communication, the story of numbers.
Wow. Yeah.
And I always thought like kind of the next story would be the story of community and justice.
Yeah.
Like just kind of like all keep
it, yes,
going.
building upon each other. Right.
And like children are always like, who am I? What came before me? What comes next?
Yes.
And we have this saying in Montessori, like young folks, like we're trying to figure out our cosmic task, like what our purpose in life is. And children can't figure that out if they don't see themselves in it. And so for me, it's like the story of community and justice. We can all see ourselves in that story somewhere.
Yeah.
And that's where like we started telling the story in our classroom that turned into like this big history of anti-racism and another of economic justice and really moving into like story of empowerment.
Yeah.
Which is really fun.
That's beautiful. Beautiful. All right. Well, I feel like that's really set us up well to talk about this book is anti-racist. This book came out just before my book, I think. Your book came out, what was it, 7th of January? Something like that?
Yep.
And mine came out on the 28th of January. So we were like orbiting around one another.
Yeah.
We just missed each other in, was it Philadelphia?
Yes, at the Library Association.
By a day.
Yes.
I think I came in and then I had to leave because I was on to my book tour and you were just coming in behind me. I was like, no, I really want to meet her.
I know. And you've met like in DC, you were with Christine Platt, who's one of my friends. And I was with Jamia Wilson in Philadelphia. And I was just like, there's all these things in our way.
So many connections, so many amazing women. But we're here to have this amazing conversation. So this book is Anti-Racist, 20 Lessons on How to Wake Up, Take Action, and Do the Work. What made you write this book? And it's your debut book. So congratulations. It's done really well. It's been amazing to see how well it's done.
It was really fun to write. I'd never intended to be an author. And I was like, in fact, told by my teachers, like, they never liked my papers. My college professors gave me bad grades. Like,
wow.
And my sister was the one she had like her degree is in magazine journalism. Okay. So I was like, she's going to be the writer.
She's the writer. Okay.
And I got an email from an editor from Quarto, Katie Flint, who also edits Jamia Wilson's books. And she was like, have you ever thought about writing children's books? And I thought it was a joke, but I emailed her back anyway. And we started talking and just kind of from our conversation, she was like, I would love to help you write a book about anti-racism for young folks. There's nothing like it. We need it. And she's a white woman in England. And I was kind of like, I don't know about this. Are you sure? And she gave me like complete control over the book and paired me with Aurelia, which is just like amazing.
It does. I will say, because I read the entire book, and I feel this way about my book as well, because I was given that same freedom to just use my own voice. My editor was also a white woman,
Okay.
and she just let me just do my own thing, you know. And so what I wanted to say is, as I read your book, all I heard was your voice. That was it. There was no watering down. There was no toning down. There was no making it whatever it would have to be acceptable or palatable to whiteness. And I'm really glad that you got that opportunity, because unfortunately the publishing world is extremely white. I know. And many Black, Indigenous people of color don't get to use their voice in that way, or have editors who will microaggress them, or have, like, I've heard writers say, you know, when they've used AAV, African American Vernacular English, in their books, they've been asked by their white editor, maybe you should have a glossary in your book to, you know, so that white people understand what you're saying, and so on and so forth, right? So I'm really grateful that you got the chance to just fully write this book.
Yeah, me too. And there were moments too where, like, I think her boss would question things. And so she would just come back and she's like, here's what I'm going to say. Is there anything else you want me to? And I'd be like, no, that's great. Thank you. And
she would protect you, protect your voice, really advocate for you to, that's amazing.
Yeah. I feel very lucky.
Yeah.
I know not everybody gets that.
No,
experience.
exactly. So, so you know, you get approached, you start writing this book. Who were you writing it for?
So I thought of, like, the first person that came to mind was, like, me when I was 9 years old. And I was like, man, like, 9-year-old Tiffany really needed this book, because I had a very, like, overtly racist teacher and didn't know, like, I could identify it, but I didn't have the words to talk about it, and I didn't know what to do next. And so 9-year-old me, and then I thought of all of my students, remembering, like, what they said. I just, like, especially remembering there's one student who now, like, also works as an aftercare teacher at our school. Oh, wow. So she's now my 4-year-old's teacher, and he loves her.
Yeah.
But I remember her mom saying, like, you know, after you did your anti-racism work, she got on the phone with her aunt, and she was talking about how all of these doors were opening up for people. And then she never knew that. And it was just one of those moments I was like, so I'm writing this book for my students, but also all the students I never got to have. And all of the students who had racist teachers like me. And for my own son, like, I'm raising 2 white boys, and I'm like, I want them to read a book and know history, and I want them to know how to stand up. And so I just, like, wrote it for all the kids I could possibly think of. But it really was, like, 9-year-old me who, like, kept coming in and being like, this is what I need from you right now. And then 14-year-old me too. Like, she popped in too.
What I will say about this book, though, is, I mean, as an adult, as a 36-year-old woman, I got so much from this book. And I know you wrote it for your inner 9-year-old, your inner 14-year-old, your kids, your students. But I mean, a lot of adults need to read this book.
Yeah.
I really appreciated it. It's full of not only just information, but glossaries, activities that I found very helpful just for myself. Very, very helpful. You know, you talk about, so one of the sections you talk about understanding our identities and understanding the places in which we have privilege and the places in which we don't. And there were some activities around that I found helpful. But what I also really like, Tiffany, that is this thread throughout the book, is this understanding of who the individual is, the reader. Who are you? What is your identity? What is your personal history? what is your personal vision and what is ours? Like, what is our collective history?
Mm-hmm.
What is our collective identity? And I found that really amazing. I love that you did that, because I think it helps people to not just like intake information as if they're reading a history lesson, but actually seeing themselves in the story, seeing themselves as part of the story, and therefore being empowered to do something from that space. You know, was that really important for you? I'm sure it was, because you knew you were talking to young people. That this information can be very overwhelming. And if you don't see yourself in it, it's kind of like, so what do I do with it? Yeah.
And I was thinking too of like, this comes, I think, from my Montessori background too, like thinking of those like big questions that all kids have is like, where do I fit into that? Not just kids, like as adults too. Where do I fit into this story of our collective story of anti-racism? And that was so important for me, that the reader be able to like put themselves into the story anywhere and be able to like see themselves any time of history, in the future, like now, and regardless, like I wanted like white students, Black students, and like I wanted everybody to be able to put themselves into it. And I think that's happening. I
think you definitely achieved that with this book, for sure. And I think about, because so with my book, Me and White Supremacy, the next thing that I'm working on is the young readers edition.
I know, I'm so excited about that.
Well, I actually find this more stressful than writing the adult version, because I don't work with children, right? So I'm like, how much is too much to share? Like, what will they understand? And at the same time, I don't want to water down the work, you know? But as I was reading through your book, what really struck me was this reminder that children are actually very smart. Okay.
They really are.
They're able to understand a lot, that they shouldn't be taken for granted in what they can understand. And that I felt this great sense of like, as I was reading your book, I was thinking about how this is the book that the adults who are now reading Me and White Supremacy, I wish that they had this book, your book, because they wouldn't necessarily need Me and White Supremacy if they'd had at a younger age the opportunity to have these conversations and to build this ability to self-reflect and think critically. You know, I have a masterclass on parenting and white supremacy that's for parents who have white privilege. And one of the things I say in that masterclass is you are, when you think about talking to your white kids about anti-racism, you're afraid because you're seeing yourself in them, and you know that you aren't equipped, and you're projecting your own fears, right? Because you're not equipped as the adult. How are they going to be able to handle it? But actually, they are better able to handle it than you are. Can you talk to us about that?
I think in like parenting, like I don't know what it's like to be a white boy in the world, right. And so I think like working with kids, the thing that I realized, I remember like early on, I was like, I have to act and like, you know, be what they want me to be. And I was like, oh wait, children just want the truth. They want like authenticity. They can like read through all of the like fakeness.
I'm thinking about my kids and the things that they say to me. You're absolutely right. They know when I'm BSing them. Like they know immediately.
I know. And like, they were even like my 4-year-old the other day at the table, he was like, looked at his papa and he was like, am I white? And his brother was like, yeah, we're white. And just like, you know,
it's like, and just clarifying, just needed to.
I know. And I think I was talking about something and I was like, white guys, or like, you know, rolling my eyes or something. And but they're so like, it's like that, just like that language and giving them just the ability to understand, like they don't have all of the weight of history on us. And if we can share the truth with them, then they're like, okay, these are the facts.
Right. And I think because they're in that age of learning, questioning, just real openness, they're very open, and they're not set as we are as adults in their identity of this is who I am, and if I act in any other way other than this, then I'm a bad person, or these are bad thoughts to have, or you know, they are really, really open. And so they don't, like, when I think about adults who have white privilege who come into work such as Me and White Supremacy, or work such as the work that you do, there's a lot of fragility and defensiveness that comes up because it's very confronting against the reality of how they know themselves. Whereas kids don't have that as much. Because they're still forming every single day. Usually their tears are because they're like actually hurt inside, and they're not trying to manipulate a situation. No, right. The sadness, that is genuine. Not that adult sadness isn't, but as to what you were saying, So I was reading it. And I was like, I bet this is easy for her to write. She works with kids all the time. You know, I was like, I have no idea how to talk to kids. And I think that's my edge, because I know how to talk to my kids who are Black. I don't know how to talk to white kids who have white privilege. And I want to be able to give them the information, and I don't want to scare them, but I also want to give them the facts. And I think it's this dance that we have to do. But I think resilience has to be built at a young age as well.
And there's one thing, my friend Britt Hawthorne, who's an anti-racist educator, she and I like often talk about when we're presenting that we will present always to the Black women in the room. And we will present like the work we're doing is always for Black women, Indigenous women, people of color. And even in writing this book, I was like, I'm writing this book for like Black biracial Tiffany, who was called so many different things as a kid, and my white sons will understand it, but who am I going to think of? Who am I going to center?
Who am I centering? Right. Yeah. And I think that's really, really powerful. I think that was there definitely for me with my book, in that I knew I was writing it to white people. But I wanted, if a Black person reads this, they feel that I spoke the truth of what we experience.
And you absolutely did. Like reading it, I'm like, oh yes. And I keep like saying to my husband, like, hey, like, read this part. I'm like, let's talk about this.
Something that I love that you did in the book as well is that you purposely chose to use the word or the term global majority when referring to Black Indigenous people of color. You do use that term as well, BIPOC, but you use the word global majority. I really love that you did that. I think words are important. I think when we use words like minority or marginalized, or it creates it perpetuates a reality that isn't true.
And it's so with children too, like whenever I'm working with teachers, and my question for myself is always like, am I empowering them or disempowering? And if I'm disempowering, then I'm doing this wrong, like I'm causing harm. And so how can we give information and empower facts and truth? And the truth is like we are the global majority. That is a term that came to me by way of Dr. Barbara J. Lab too. Like she's and it was somebody who had worked with her, who I worked with, and shared it, and then just like kind of kept like it's the only word now. Like, why would we ever say minorities? Like, anytime anybody uses minorities, I'm like, nope. Like,
no. And I know in the UK, I mean, the word, they don't use BIPOC or Black Indigenous people of color. They use BAME or BAME, which is Black, Asian, Minority, Ethnic, which is not a term that I feel comfortable with either. I think we are, like you said, the global majority. Black and brown people, Indigenous people, we are the global majority. And I think it's again subverting white supremacy by telling the truth instead of telling the truth that white supremacy is trying to convince us of, which is that white people are the majority and are the more superior race, right? So I think that was really important. I love that you did that. You also talked about, and I wrote this today because I was getting excited for our conversation. And I said, one of the things that I love about Tiffany's book is that she shares examples and stories from all around the world to highlight the fact that white supremacy is not a US-centric or a US-only phenomenon. It is a global phenomenon, and anti-Blackness is a global phenomenon. I know that you used examples from the UK, from Australia and New Zealand, from European countries, and from countries that kind of are where white supremacy is the dominant paradigm.
Yeah.
But I would also say, I get comments or remarks from people who are in African countries, in Asian countries, where white people are not ruling, right? But the effects, the after effects of colonization still very much inform the way people think and live. Yeah.
You're like, who has power? It's the people with lighter skin.
Right.
What are the cultural holidays that we celebrate? What are the foods that we eat?
Right.
Like, it's so
and what is attractive,
ingrained.
Right? So curly hair, let's relax it. Darker skin, let's bleach it, right? White people don't even have to be present for those white supremacist paradigms to be present. But I think this is so important. We were doing a live version of Good Ancestor podcast recently, and in our final one, where I had all our speakers come back and we were having a conversation, and I said to the audience, you can ask some questions in the Q&A box. I must have gotten 3 questions that started off that said, I'm a white British woman. How can I address, racism in our country? Very much with the thinking that this is a US thing. It's not really present here. It's sort of, it is here, but it's not really here. Yeah. Right. And that a lot of that white exceptionalism happens countrywide. I'm really curious, why was it important for you, as someone who is American, why was it important for you to include examples in the book that were global?
Yeah. So I think, again, like thinking of all those like students around the world, and I'm like, one, I want everyone to understand racism is a global issue. Like colonization happens all around the globe. And it's my son's principal, like she'll say, and she said something like Halloween is one of those holidays that we can't escape thanks to the dominant culture. And she'll say things like that. But thinking for me, I'm like, this is our inescapable truth. Like the dominant culture and colonization has just shaped everything. Yeah. And I was working with a school, and one of their teachers was from France, and we were doing all this work in anti-bias, anti-racist education. And after a whole day together, she came up to me and she goes, well, it's just not like this in France. And I was like, what? Are you kidding me? And she was like, it's such an American thing, like apple pie. And I was like, well, apples didn't come from America. Yeah. And like,
as a Black Muslim woman, I just want to say to that lady, I think she needs to take a deeper look at her country.
I know. Yeah. And I was like, well, it's a global issue, but that is so ingrained. Like, oh, it's an American issue. And maybe, like right now it is at the forefront because we have a very like racist president. But it's a part of who we are is like globally for so long.
Right. I really appreciated that, because I, as somebody who sits at different intersections, this is something that I talk about, and I'll often say because people sometimes think, well, you're just American. I'm like, first of all, I'm not even.
You're like, thank you.
I'm not. I am speaking about this from a global perspective. I'm also talking about this from the way that white supremacy has shaped the world and the way it shapes our consciousness globally as well. I don't go into talking about politics or policies or the specifics of institutions, because I don't have experience there. I don't have lived experience there. I don't have worked experience there. But white supremacy operates at these multiple layers, each of which needs to be examined. And something that you say in the book, which I very much believe, is, you talk about how the fact that systems are made up of people, And so in order to change the systems, the people have to change. The systems don't change if the people don't change.
Yeah, you say the same thing in your
book.
Too.
Yeah. But it's so nice to see it reflected, right? It's so important to see it reflected, because people think, well, as long as the president goes, we get a new president, or this particular law changes, then it's fixed, and it's not. It's not,
because we're just like complicit with it. I always think too, like, I love working with children, because my goal, and I work with a lot of like children who come from some affluence too, and so my goal is always like, if I can get them to see the privilege and immunity,
right?
It's like the secret weapons. And I've had great conversations with white children about privilege and power that they take back to the dinner table, and really wanting like that to be how we start to dismantle this like system too. Because we, as a parent, I don't want to disappoint my children.
Right. Well, you know, speaking of sort of superpowers, you talk about superpowers in the book, and you share 2 of your superpowers, which I really loved. One was interrupting, and one was dancing. Talk to us a little about those. Why was it important for you to include those? What do you want the readers to get from that?
That came from so kind of with my students in the middle of doing like the history of racism and anti-racism, we would take breaks from the history and we would do community building. And one time I was like, what is your superpower? As we're like playing in the playground. And they're like, flying. And I'm like, but don't hurt yourself, you know? And I was like, mine is interrupting. And it like, I had just come out of a meeting with our head of school around that time, who told me I need to be quieter at meetings, because I was always standing up and being like, no.
Right.
And I was like, you know, I am a fast processor. I think quickly. And so sometimes I'll just interrupt somebody, and it's easier for me to do that than somebody else, because I have the words right on the tip of my tongue. And I've shared this with my son too. And I'm like, you know, you have to be mindful of who you're interrupting, but being able to like process what's happening and stop it before it gets worse can be a really powerful tool to have in your tool belt. And with dancing, like there are times, and this is like being in quarantine or self-distancing with my children, like we're like, let's just turn up the music, because we were just all arguing, and it just helps us like reconnect with our bodies and what's around us, and to like be moved by a sensation that is externally instead of internally, but coming from inside.
And move that energy around, right? So what I loved about you sharing about interrupting was that it was this great reminder that we as people, and especially you're talking to young people, but all people really, when we think about I'm powerless, what can I do, what can I say, I don't have a platform, I don't have political power, I don't have position, I have the power to interrupt though. I have the power when something happens, right, for me to say something or jump in or cut off or call out, or that I can do. And I felt that was really important, because people who are sitting at all different kinds of locations of identity and privilege and positions are reading your work, right? And so it's important for people not to think, oh, this is great, this is really, really important, but I'm not the one to do it because I don't have X, Y, Z abilities. Right.
Anybody can do it.
Right.
And it's, I think of my 8-year-old, he's pretty like introverted. And he, like, what I think one of his superpowers is the ability to observe. Like he will like kind of notice everything before he dives into a situation, which is like the opposite of me right away. But that power then like turns into noticing, like there are 4 cop cars across the street, and like being able to like notice how many police there are and what they're doing and listening. And that is such a like powerful tool too. And when you combine them, like he and I could be like an amazing super duo.
And also this, you know, the fact that we are all different. Every single human being is different. Some of us are more this, some of us are more that. There's different ways that we're going to be approaching the work. And that and I know you talk about this in the book, right? That the way that we show up in anti-racism work will grow and evolve with us. But it really is about, finding who you are in this work and the way that you're uniquely going to do this work. I think that's really important, because I think when we're trying to do it like somebody else, like, oh, I have to go do this or I have to do that, I think it's a huge disservice to what you can offer, right? So using the example of your son, if he felt like, well, I have to be like mom, right? And his very nature is observation and then making very astute observations and being able to move from that place, we miss out on that. Yeah.
And it is like, it's that work of like when you're working with other people, like you can't all have the same superpowers. Nothing will get done.
Right. Yeah. So you actually I want to ask you this, and then I'm going to talk about that. So you talked about earlier, you wrote this book for 9-year-old you, and you had a teacher in your school who's very racist. You share a story, and I'm wondering if you can share it with us, about an incident where she was extremely racist to a Black boy who was in your class. And you share how you wish, if you'd known, you wish you would have done this and you would have done that. If only you'd known that you could have done that. But of course, you were 9 years old and she was an adult. And the power structures are what they are, right? But that is, first of all, it was awful reading what happened in that moment. Like I said, my daughter's 10. I cannot imagine as a class full of 9 and 10-year-olds, what they would feel, how they would process that, what they would be able to do. But also that it's reflected across many schools. You share some statistics in the book about, and I'm forgetting the number now, but overwhelmingly teachers in America are white.
It's like 84%.
Something really high. And overwhelming, I think more than 50% of students are Black and brown. I live in Qatar. My kids go to a British school. The student body, and I write about this in the book, the student body is extremely multiracial. It was when I was there. It's the same school I went to. Extremely multiracial. White people were definitely the minority in that school, but the teachers are the majority. The admin staff, the leadership staff, they are the majority. There are now a handful, and I say on one hand, number of teachers of color. There's one Black woman, one Black man. I haven't seen the Black man because he's in a different campus, and it's sort of a few different Asian teachers. But, I try to speak to them about the fact that it's really important for all of our kids to see the teachers and the leadership in the school reflective of what they look like, because they're going to go out into the world and they're going to think that people who look white are the people who should be in positions of authority and not themselves. Right? So talk to us a little bit, tell us a little bit about that story with the boy and how the current structures that exist in schools across America, schools such as my kids' schools, what does that create for kids of color and white kids, actually? What does that create in the consciousness?
I mean, like immediately, like what comes to mind is like we start believing that it's only white folks who can like guide us and take care of us and lead us, and that all of like our Black folks and people of the global majority, like they are we can't trust them or believe them. And that just like really messes up with your psyche and who you are going to be. I think of like Malcolm X, who told his teacher he wanted to be a lawyer, and his teacher was like, no. And how that kind of like led him into his path of that got him in jail, because and he goes back to that. And this is what teachers do to it. They have the power to like really support and honor you, and they also have the power to like take away anything you believe in. And when they are like operating in savior mode, or they're just operating out of their own bias and prejudice, like they are not caring. Like my third grade teacher did not care about us. I don't even know why she was teaching.
Right. Yeah. Tell us that story. Because it was.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, there's so much she did in their classroom. It was probably like the most beautiful classroom in that school. And I remember just like she would constantly, she and her family lived in a suburb that was like very white, and she would constantly tell us about the like fun field trips her children went on, or the author visits. Like the next day she brought in the book My Teacher is an Alien by Bruce Coville, and she was like, Bruce Coville visited my child's school, so I'm going to read this book to you. Wow. And we were like, okay. Yeah. And there were just many different things. You know, I remember one of the boys who sat next to me, he was a Latinx boy, and he had to go to the bathroom and kept asking her, and she denied him until he had an accident. And it was a third grade. Like third graders don't typically have accidents.
Right.
And you know, instead of having empathy, she ended up shaming him, which was just like not okay. And like just thinking about, you know, like I never drank water afterwards. Like I would get headaches because I was dehydrated, but I didn't want to.
You didn't want to be in that position, right?
Yeah.
Right.
And then I'm sure like many of my other classmates were feeling the same way. And she also like, so I remember in the book I talk about like there was a time she was like writing on the chalkboard, spelling words or consonants, and my friend and I would like take turns correcting her because she made a lot of mistakes. And he's a black boy, and then there was me, and like he and I we were together in first grade, second grade. We were like best buddies. We'd always been together. And there was one day like he corrected, I think it was the word, I think she spelled Asia with 3 A's. And he corrected her, and she just yelled, and it was like what she called him was so horrible. She called him a black African ape. And that like, wow, just like everything was like, after that I remember like physically or like mentally building a brick wall around my desk, like pretending I had a brick wall so I didn't have to like deal with her. And I went home and like talked to my mom about it, but then like our teacher was still there, and like we didn't know what else to do. We talked to the principal. We still had to be in the class. He still had to be in the class with her. She was grading him. She never apologized. And I just think of like, that is, to me, like that is like one of the worst of the worst. And that happens, and it's not the worst of the worst. So there are teachers who are kicking children out and calling police on their students. I once interviewed somebody to work at our school, and the question was like, what was the hardest thing you had to do? And she said, I had to call the police on a kid 3 times. And I was like, but you didn't have to. Right. Like, you don't ever have to call the police on a kid. Wow. Like, but it's that like mentality, like I have to do this. Right. Like and you talk about it in your book, like anti-Blackness and children. Yeah. Like for children, they're children, and we're like treating them like they're grown scary monsters, and they're like beautiful loving little children. Right. We're looking to school and the system to be educated, like that's our right. Like although in the United States we don't have the same rights because we've not signed the UN Declaration for children's rights, but ideally we would have the right to an education, but we don't get that, and the darker your skin is, our country doesn't really. And that just that. As a mother of a son, to hear that is really, really hard. You know, there's nothing that we wouldn't do for our children. Yeah. And to be able to try to survive as Black people in the mouth of white supremacy is so hard. And I often think about some of the survival strategies that my mom, who mainly raised us a lot when we were young because my father worked at sea, some of the survival strategies that she had to teach us and had to sort of enforce just so that we could grow up and be, you know, the best, so that white supremacy wouldn't define us in these awful ways, but that ultimately end up
doing white supremacy's job for them anyway.
Yeah.
It's really, really hard. And I cannot imagine how hard it was for him to have to come back into that space every single day after being called an animal.
I know.
In front of his friends, you know, and for you as the other light-skinned but still Black biracial child in the class, right, who was also often challenging her, having to also be in that space and really, really powerless. And I can imagine that there are white people of white privilege listening to this and thinking, but I would never do that. I would never do
sure
that.
She didn't think she would either. Right. I don't think she came to school being like, this is what I'm going to do today.
Right. And it doesn't, you don't have to call a child that to dehumanize them either. There are ways of treating, I mean, I remember growing up I grew up in a mainly predominantly white school. There were not children who looked like me. I was never mistreated by my teachers, but I always got the sense that if there was something going on, I wasn't going to get picked for it.
Yeah.
Or that in somehow I just had to make myself just small and likable as much as possible, because I just didn't feel like I could fully be myself in that space. I felt like if I was fully myself, that would be a bad thing. And so there's all of these ways that teachers in particular, because that's what we're talking about here, who are white, don't realize the power that they have in these spaces, don't realize the harm that they're causing, whether that harm is through active harm like what that teacher did, or that way of showing up that's very white saviorist.
And it's so like, it doesn't have to be that way. So we had a second grade teacher who, like, I think very fondly of. She was also a white woman, and when students were having a rough day, she would have them sit next to her at her desk or like under her desk. So her idea was like, if I keep them closer, and I this is my like thinking as a teacher too, like you keep the kids who need extra support and love closer, and you don't push them away with your words or physically out the door.
Right.
And so it was also like being in that third grade class was such a shock from a teacher who, like, she actively showed us she loved us in different ways. And I'm sure it was some saviorism there too. But it was, that I don't think that third grade teacher lasted at that school for very long. But my guess is she left because she chose to leave and not because somebody was like, it's time for you.
Right. Ooh, it's heavy.
I know.
It's heavy, but you know, for the white kids in classes such as those, or in situations where they see something happening and you're equipping them in this book with an understanding of how to think critically, to be able to see a situation and understand what's going on, you include like this list of things that they can do as children, as young people. If they see something happening, there are things that you can do. You can call an adult, you can call this, you can video them on your phone, you can speak to the adult that's next to you and say. I thought that was really amazing that you didn't just stop it at, here's some information that you can learn that will help you. You took it to, here's how you can actually actively be anti-racist. Why was that important for you to add? I'm really glad that you did.
Thank you. So, well, I think there's so many times like we say to kids like, oh, you can do this. And they're like, what is it that I can do? And like younger folks think more concretely. And so to be able to have a list that you can almost like start from before you build, and adults, we need this too, like a starting point. And I think with my own children too, like they're, you know, if they were in that third grade class, I would want my son to like stand up and be like, that's not okay. But what he would do as an observer is he would notice everything that was happening and how everyone was feeling, and he would come home and talk to me, or he would talk to another trusted teacher.
Right.
My hope is that like each child will take, each student, each person who reads it will take one of those and start their toolbox with that, and then be able to grow from there. I
love that you went onto the toolbox, because I wanted to read something from one of the activities in your book, and this is on page 97, which is under the chapter on choosing your path and take action. So choosing my path, I think it's chapter 11. And it's the second activity, and you say, imagine you have an anti-racist toolbox that you carry around with you. What's in it and why? Here are some of the things I have in mind. A notebook and a pen, so I can write down observations, thoughts, etc. Photographs of my family and friends to help ground me and keep me connected with those who I trust and love. Chocolate and almonds for quick energy. A reusable water bottle because I need to stay hydrated. Tiger balm is in there. When I get stressed, the tension builds in my shoulders and neck. It hurts. The tiger balm helps to ease that pain. I always have a book or two to read and make sure they're by Black, Indigenous, people of color authors and folks living outside the imaginary box. And you can define for us what that is in just a moment. Information about my rights in English and Spanish. And my phone charged so I can easily connect with others and take photos and videos. I loved this so much. And the reason why I loved it is because I often think about, I talk about Me and White Supremacy being this book that you carry, this tool you carry in your, your backpack, your anti-racist backpack. And I often think of Peggy McIntosh's invisible knapsack, right? And I say, you have this knapsack, you're carrying around with all these privileges, right? So you need to put something else in there, right? That is going to actually help you be in the practice of anti-racism. But what I love is that you help them to understand this is lifelong work and therefore it has to be sustainable. Right. So we've got the chocolate, the almonds, right? We've got the water bottle, we've got the tiger balm, because this is not a short walk we're going on. And then
you just have to like move through the pain sometimes.
Right. I really love that you included that. What do you want people to take away from it, both children and adults?
So those are like all things that I walk around with in my backpack every day.
Actual walk around with.
And I actually miss walking around with my backpack right now.
Yeah.
And I want everybody to be able to see like those things that they can use to be able to sustain themselves and to, think of just like the photographs of my family, like we can on our phones too, but having like a physical picture. In my wallet I have like a little one of my dad and my sister and I when we were like babies, and then like this is who I'm doing. So that reminder too, as adults and as children, like who we're doing this work for. And like I'm always I have so many different notebooks and pens, like writing things down. But my hope is like people will build this like toolkit, because this is like work that feels very abstract, but it's so concrete.
That's right.
We need to have things that we can like physically do to stay connected to the work, whether it's writing or drawing, carrying around a full water bottle and that by the end of the day it should be empty, because if it's not, you're going to have a headache. But really wanting those things. And my son, like in his backpack for school, like he has like tissues and a snack and, like Band-Aids and some like ointment in case he or somebody, falls down and they can't get to the nurse. And he has, like the little buttons from the book, like of Aurelia's drawings. He's got pins and buttons all over it, but he has extras so he can give them to people too. And just thinking of like kids love, like they have things all the time. And if they can like have something to share, or if they can start building that, they can stay connected.
And it creates an entirely different way of seeing yourself as you move through the world, and understanding that, first, the understanding that if you're white, you have white privilege, right? That so you're already carrying something around, but that you can actually then, as you begin to move into this practice, really begin to look at what do I choose to be in there that can help empower me, support me, educate me, inform me, ground me, right? All of these things, so that I can be in this life long work. And like you said, it can feel, especially, my work is very much about like self-reflect, right? Like, and it can start to feel really abstract, right? But it's not abstract, because racism, being on the receiving end of racism, is very real. It's very concrete, it's very visceral. And it's so important for people who have that privilege to understand it. You have to engage with it in this very visceral way as well. So I said, explain to us about the imaginary box that you talk about in the book.
So the imaginary box is really like, it's what's considered normal, the dominant culture. And like, there's always that expression like, oh, are you like, was it a square peg trying to fit in a round hole?
Right.
Or you have to think outside the box.
Right.
And it's one of those things, there's this little box. It's very small, but it contains all of these things that we're supposed to aspire to, and that tiny box holds like everything. It holds all the resources, controls all the policies. And once you like get out of the box, it's like all of us. And it's like beautiful and it's like creative and there's so much life. But this like imaginary box, like it's so oppressive. And there's an educator who's using it and he's like, can you explain the box? And so I like drew a picture for him. And we talked about what would go inside, and it's a like work that came from an anti-racism workshop with Crossroads Anti-Racism. Like they do a lot of work around the Borderlands model from Gloria Anzaldua's Borderlands, La Frontera. And it's like also like that work that I do with students, like they're so concrete. So you're like, hey, let's draw this box, and like when you watch TV, what do you see all the time? Or like when you're looking at books in your public library, who's represented? And they can name it so easily.
I found it really interesting actually that you use the imaginary box, because I always say like the world is the world of the dominant culture is designed for a very specific kind of person who fits into this box, and in this box is white male, cisgendered, right, middle to upper class, thin, right, heterosexual, like he's in that box. And
so small,
right? It's so tiny. That's who the world is. The world is designed for that person to thrive. The person who fits in that box, this world is designed for them to thrive. And the less identities you have in that box, the more this world is not designed for you to thrive, right? So we move outside of that. So I found that really interesting because I really identified with that. But I love that then you then ask questions. You get them to think about, like you said, like when you watch a TV show or a movie, what do you see? Who's the protagonist, right? Who's the stories about in a book? Who's being featured? And things of that nature to really help them see the box is not, again, this abstract idea. It's there everywhere.
The question I love to ask students is like, at school, who's making all of the rules? Who's in charge? Who's on the board? Let's look at their pictures.
Right.
And they're like, they get very outraged too, which is great.
Well, let's talk about that then, because I think one of the things that people who have white privilege want to protect their kids from is the outrage. And because I think the outrage then comes with action. Right, you get outraged and you feel all kinds of things, right? And as people, we want to make sure our kids are happy most of the time, right? But also that it comes with this that has to be channeled into something, and that will buck against the system, right? What do you want to say to those people about allowing their children to feel the grief, the rage, the outrage, like all of those things as they become more awake?
And we have to like be able to give our kids that agency to make change. And I think of one of my favorite things I did with my students a couple of years ago was we were talking about economic justice, and we were I brought in the story of the Black Panther Party and their 10-point program. And I was like, so what would your program look like for economic justice in our school? And this was after looking at statistics, talking about race and gender, and how like white men get paid this and Indigenous women get paid that. And like so
they have context, they have an understanding of the facts, right?
Absolutely. Like the context is so important, but that like outrage is because they're learning the truth.
Yeah.
And we can give them agency by giving them tools, providing them with opportunities. So what we did was they came up with their 9-point program for economic justice within our community. And one of them was like, everybody gets a stuffy, like they like so cute. And I was like, okay, what do you want to do with this? And they're like, we want to meet with the board. And I was like,
wow.
Okay.
Yes.
So invited board members and community members to hear their voices.
Yeah.
And then from there, like as adults, you're like, okay, these kids are going to hold me accountable.
They're holding me accountable, right? They were very clear. They understand the facts. This is what they want, right?
Yeah.
Amazing. Yeah. Oh, that's so amazing.
Nobody was hurt in the process.
That's right.
The adults learned more. The children had agency. Things started to like improve, nothing bad happened because their children were empowered.
And that's such a key learning. Thank you for sharing that story, because I think, it's huge. I think we're often, again, as adults, so attached to the power structures, so attached to our identities and the way things are, that the idea that those who we see as less powerful, in this case, the children, right, would be able to tell the adults, actually, this is what needs, from what we're observing, from the context we understand, this is what we want to see happen, and we're going to hold you accountable to this. Huge.
And like as kids, we adults are we're trying to figure out what they need, and they get to tell us. We should always be listening. I love, like, the Black Panther Party is such a great, like, knowing the history is such a great way of bringing in, like, you can talk about intersectionality, economic justice, like racial equity. It's solidarity work. I love bringing their work into the lives of my white students.
And just, and again, because I've said this a million times now, this book is really, it is for everybody of all ages. And I think what I really appreciate in you sharing all of these different stories, both historical and present day, is giving people context and understanding so that they can understand what the real truth is versus what we are being taught is the truth. One of the things you talk about is how, especially in America, in North America, how the stories of what America was before Christopher Columbus arrived, right? There's the dominant culture story, right? And then there's the actual reality of what it was. And undoing that, when you've been taught from a very young age, Christopher Columbus discovered America, and you're not just taught it, the entire world is taught that. We were taught that in the UK, right? The whole world is taught that. So reclaiming history, retelling it from its roots is so important in being able to, like we said, decenter whiteness, decentering a white narrative, and then giving people tools to be able to say, oh, from that understanding of what the truth is, this is what should be happening. Yeah. Oh, Tiffany, you're amazing. You're so amazing. You. Thank you so much for this incredible book. I said it today on Instagram, everybody needs to buy this book. Everybody. I guess I do have our last question that I ask every guest, but I think it would be remiss for me not to ask this for our educators who are listening to this conversation. Are there any tools that you have or things that you can direct them to how to bring work of this nature into their schools?
So I always encourage folks to start with themselves first. And so this book is like the tool that I always
Me and White Supremacy. Thank you.
Me and White Supremacy. And it is like, I've been working with educators in Texas, and they did your work when it was the workbook. And the way they're able to make the leap in trust that the changes we're making in the classroom for Black and Brown students are going to benefit everybody, like they're doing it. And it's so exciting. How they're able to jump into, because they've done all that internal work. And the other book, I have like all these books here.
We love
the other book is Anti-Bias Education for young children and ourselves. And it's for young, like, kids, but I always think what works for our youngest will work for our oldest students.
Yes.
And we have, it like also reminds us to go back to their like humanity as like young people. So those are like the books. And then I have a curriculum that every now and then I do a curriculum training that is like the framework of the anti-racist history work that I've done with my students. And there are about 300 educators in the world who have done the training and downloaded it. And then there's a couple of schools that are using it as their anti-bias, anti-racist curriculum, which is awesome.
And where can they find that? How can they get their hands on that?
There, I usually post on social media or Patreon, like a workshop is coming up. And this May, it's May already. The end of this month, I'm recording a training just so people can access it whenever they need to.
Amazing.
And then once they're done the training, because the training is like me explaining how I've used it, and it's not a script. So if you download it, you're going to look at it and be like, what is this?
Right.
It has to come from you.
Right.
And so after.
And that's why that inner work first is so important, right?
Yep.
Yes. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Amazing. Yeah. Well, we'll make sure to link to everything. And thank you.
Oh, wait. Oh, there's one more book.
Okay.
Too. Sorry. It's my favorite. Letters to Marsha by Enid Lee.
Okay.
And it's out of print, but you can still find it. And it's really like thin.
Mm-hmm.
But it's a teacher's guide to anti-racist education. And it's so beautiful. And everyone should support Enid Lee's work because she's amazing.
Amazing.
Her other book is, what is it? Beyond Heroes and Holidays. It was edited with Teaching for Tolerance, I think, or Teaching for Change. I can't remember which one. But it's so filled with information. Awesome.
Amazing. So there are resources, there are things that people write, and it's that willingness to take it on and to say, this is my responsibility, that I can't necessarily wait for the school to tell me we need to do it.
Yeah, because they're not going to.
They're not going to, right? When we talk about institutional change and how it has to come from the individuals, teachers who are listening, white teachers who have white privilege, please take this on as your responsibility. Curate your education and make it part of your work to say, how can I interrupt, as you said earlier, right? How can I interrupt whiteness, and how can I really, in this school, right, create a whole different legacy? Amazing.
And really, teachers have more power than admin do. Like, they're building relationships with students and families, and that's power right there. And I think a lot of teachers are waiting for admin and the administration and the system to tell them what to do.
Right.
But just, you do it in your classroom.
Do it. Right. It's amazing. All right. Tiffany, our final question. What does it mean to you to be a good ancestor?
Oh, it means a lot of things. I think right now, and I would answer it differently every day.
Yeah, me too.
But it means, for me, it means to learn from the past and to extend that knowledge into the future. So to share that with my own children in hopes that they'll share that with their children. Yeah. So the truth is something that becomes our always history.
Yeah.
And it means that to be a good ancestor also means to be like honest and truthful, even when it feels uncomfortable, because there's always discomfort before we grow.
Yeah.
And so if I can lean into that discomfort and to acknowledge it and work through it and then name it and share it, then I can be a better ancestor for my own children and for everyone.
That's beautiful. Thank you, Tiffany.
Thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate you.
Oh, I appreciate you. And if you need help with your book, let me know.
Thank you. Thank you. You'll be getting a desperate email from me soon.
Because I'm like itching to write it into the curriculum. Like now that Stamped is out too from Jason Reynolds and Pendy, I'm like, all right, good. Now we have all these tools.
We're gonna be like, here's this stack of tools for you. Please. Yeah. Thank you. All right. Bye.
Welcome. Bye.
This is Layla Saad, and you've been listening to Good Ancestor Podcast. I hope this episode has helped you find deeper answers on what being a good ancestor means to you. We'd love to have you join the Good Ancestor Podcast family over on Patreon, where subscribers get early access to new episodes, patron-only content and discussions, and special bonuses. Join us now at patreon.com/Good Ancestor Podcast. Thank you for listening, and thank you for being a good ancestor.